You're tuned in to the Reality Fred podcast. Food and travel, cool stuff, weird stuff, entertainment, and more. You made the choice to be here, and my friend, you've chosen wisely. Now buckle up, because it's time to get started. It's time for the Reality Fred podcast.
Hello, friends, and welcome back, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Reality Fred podcast. Just a quick update. We are getting things moving along. You can officially now find the Reality Fred podcast on the iPhone podcast app. We are finally linked up through iTunes, and we'll keep updating you as we go along here with the additional places that the podcast is being made available. But of course, you can always find them at realityfred.com. We have a couple new episodes recorded that are just still in post-production. We are lining up some new and exciting topics coming ahead. And definitely make sure you're following us on social media. We got the Twitter, the Instagram, Facebook. Everything's starting to chug along, so pretty exciting. And I hope you liked our new intro. This is the first podcast featuring our new intro. And of course, I made sure to seek out an Irish lad to help out with that. Of course, anything and everything that I can do in my Irish heritage, I'm going to go for it. So we have a new intro to the podcast with a Irish voice talent out of Ireland, which is pretty awesome. So this is going to actually be episode number 2, and this is a very spontaneous podcast tonight. I realize that tomorrow is June 14th, and I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. And most of you are probably thinking, what's June 14th? Well, hopefully some of you out there know that June 14th is National Bourbon Day. One of the greatest days of the year, but June 14th is National Bourbon Day. I've had it on my calendar for a while, but then I kind of just noticed today that, oh boy, that's tomorrow. And so I wanted to do a bourbon podcast tonight, and I'm going to release it tomorrow, put it out there on National Bourbon Day. So I wanted to do something fun, lighthearted, and interesting, but I always like to keep things educational. I mean, if I'm going to do something, I like to learn, and I like to make sure other people learn some things as well. So what I decided to do this evening is we're going to talk about Jefferson's bourbon. And we're going to talk a little bit about Jefferson's bourbon and what makes them a little bit unique and different in the bourbon world. And I have, at my house here, I have 4 of their bourbons. They have a lot of different bourbons in their line and always seem to be adding new stuff. Kind of hard to keep up with all of it. I don't have all of them. But I have 4 interesting bourbons of theirs. I have Jefferson's Reserve, Jefferson's Ocean, and the Groth Reserve Cask Finish. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through each one of these bourbons one at a time with you. I've got them all out here in front of me. We're going to learn about each one of them, and then I'll go through each of them one at a time here. We'll take note of their the color, the aroma, and the characteristics of each. So this should be a fun little podcast experiment going over Jefferson's bourbon in celebration of National Bourbon Day. So real quick, what I actually want to do to introduce this segment, of course, is introduce Jefferson's. Now, I'm pulling all the information right off their website, so everything that we talk about here, you can read up and follow up on jeffersonsbourbon.com. So Jefferson's was founded in 1997, and it is a father-son brainchild. Okay, so it was started by Trey and his father, Chet. And what kind of makes Jefferson's unique, what their approach is that the spirit of experimentation. So let's take a step back. Most of us who know a thing or two about bourbon and whiskey know that we are, I don't want to say in the middle because who knows how long this is going to last, but we're in a great bourbon boom right now and have been for several years now at least. And with that has come a lot of exciting things, but experimentation has been a big thing. Prior to this boom, you had all your staple bourbons and things like that. But now that the market has grown so much, to get your product out there, you've got to find a way to be different. And even the bourbons that have been around for a long time, and the big names out there, even they know that they've got to experiment and put new product out there to stay relevant, to stay interesting, to continue competing. But it's a good thing, especially for the consumer. There's a lot of new bourbons out there and a lot of new things being done. The main thing, there's a lot of things, but in the simplest manner speaking here with all the experimentation that's going on with bourbon, you're not allowed to change the characteristics of the bourbon outside of the barrel. So once you pour that liquid out of the barrel, once it comes out of the barrel and leaves the barrel, you can't do anything else to it other than water it down to the if you're making that particular bourbon reach a specific proof level. But you can't really change the taste or the characteristics. So anything you have to do or that you want to do has to be done within the barrel. To give you some examples, one of my favorites is Maker's 46. I believe what goes on there, at Maker's, they essentially take their Maker's Mark staple bourbon product, and after it's aged to the point where it is Maker's Mark, they pour it into, I believe, a new barrel. And in that new barrel are French oak stays, so French oak wood inside that barrel. So now Maker's Mark is sitting in a new barrel. It's getting even more of the caramelization and sugars from that new barrel, but it's being influenced by this French oak that's inside the barrel. Really interesting experiment, and it's a fantastic product. You have Woodford Double Oaked, which is essentially they take it out of once it's reaches the point where it would be Woodford Reserve. They put it in a brand new barrel and let it age even longer to become a more complex Woodford Reserve. And those are just two examples. But Jefferson's just keeps pushing the envelope and trying all sorts of new things. So that's what we're going to get into a little bit. That's a little bit of background about Jefferson's. Now, one thing to know about Jefferson's is you can't really just hop in the car and go visit the Jefferson's distillery. So Jefferson's is not one of those like a Maker's Mark, a Woodford, a Wild Turkey. They own their own distillery and produce their own product and barrel it in-house and, just having everything done in-house. Jefferson's uses the Kentucky Artisan Distillery. So the Kentucky Artisan Distillery is actually where the actual bourbon is made for Jefferson. So if you do want to visit a place and learn a little bit more, you would actually be going and visiting the Kentucky Artisan Distillery. I believe I read online at their website that they currently produce 3 different brands. Of course, Jefferson's being the most well-known of those 3 brands. Okay, so let's go get started. Just to recap again, we're going to talk about Jefferson's, which is also known as very small batch. So that's kind of their baseline bourbon. That's kind of their starter, which is interesting that it's a very small batch and that's their starter, but we'll get to that. Then you have Jefferson's Reserve. That's another one that we have here that we're going to talk about. Jefferson's Ocean, and the Groth Cask Finish. So, let's start with Jefferson's, a.k.a. Jefferson's Very Small Batch. So, right off the website, Jefferson's bourbon is made in very small batches, actually ridiculously small batches. We take up to 4 different Kentucky straight bourbon whiskeys of different ages and marry them together. Doing this, we get a lot of complexity and balance while maintaining the consistency needed in a bourbon, one of the blends comprising of at least 55% of the total. We wanted to make it big enough for the connoisseur, yet approachable for people just getting into the premium bourbon field. So Jefferson's Very Small Batch is a blended bourbon of, it says here, up to 4 different Kentucky straight bourbon whiskeys, and that's interesting because that is that is by doing a blending process. That's how you get to the point where a lot of times you can make a product that is exactly what you want it to be, that you have a vision for a product, and it's that blending process that enables you to get things dead on. So very neat. And again, that's Jefferson's Very Small Batch. And I agree. When it says here that it's approachable for people just getting into the premium bourbon field, people that I know that have tried Jefferson's, either people that are just getting into bourbon or just getting into Jefferson's for the first time, it definitely is correct. It is a very approachable bourbon. But it is sophisticated at the same time. So it's not approachable in terms that it's simple and just easy to drink. It's approachable because they've designed something that is very palatable, very good, but certainly sophisticated, okay? Jefferson's Reserve. In 1997, when Jefferson's was first starting out, we found a 15-year-old bourbon that we immediately knew was rich, complex, and needed to be brought to market. It was in 2003 that we decided to bring in other bourbons to marry with the original Jefferson's Reserve. Similar to Jefferson's, we still use over 50% of that mash bill and add up to 3 more bourbons to create more flavor and complexities. Jefferson's Reserve is a big, sophisticated bourbon that has a lot of flavor up front, a lot of weight mid-palate, and a deep, wonderful finish. So here is a Jefferson's Reserve, which is intended to be just a more complex and robust bourbon. Now, we're going to talk about probably one of the more unique and interesting experiments in the world of bourbon, but that's Jefferson's Ocean. So let's first read the description here. This bourbon started out as an experiment with just 3 bourbon barrels on Trey's friend Chris Fisher, his ship, in a curious effort to discover what would happen if bourbon was left to weather the extreme elements, temperature fluctuations, salt air, and the gentle rocking of the ship. The result was a thick, dark bourbon that showcases complex flavors reminiscent of other spirits. The almost black color and caramel flavors resemble a dark rum as the sugars within the barrels caramelized. The briny, savory taste from the barrels breathing the sea air is reminiscent of Islay Scotch, and at its core, it's a true bourbon. Due to a massive demand from consumers, Trey has now commercialized this experiment and sent hundreds of barrels around the world. Each voyage of Jefferson's Ocean typically crosses the equator 4 times, visits 5 continents, and over 30 ports on an average sailing. Now, what's neat about this experiment, this commercialized experiment at this point of Jefferson's Ocean aged at sea, is that it's all about the voyage. So each voyage, they're only sending a ship out one at a time with all these barrels for quite some time. As it mentioned, all around the world, crossing the equator multiple times, visiting multiple continents and over 30 ports on an average sailing. But every voyage is unique. So whenever you are purchasing one of these bottles, I'm not sure if it says on the bottle. Oh, you know what? It does say on the bottle. So around the neck of the bottle, the one I have here says voyage number 6. So what's really neat is they track the voyage. So each voyage, each one of these ships that goes out. So I have version 6. I can't tell you how many versions there have been at this point, right off the top of my head. I'd have to look into that. But each voyage is unique. The ship is out at different times of the year, going to different places, the length of time, everything is different. So what's neat about it is for the people that are kind of following this and getting into this, each bottle from a different voyage is going to be different. You can't have a generalized statement about Jefferson's Ocean aged at sea, because voyage 6 might taste a lot different than voyage 3. And what's going to make it kind of neat, because these are all going to eventually turn into like collectors. It might,